Azrael's Tear is a masterpiece in the adventure genre. It was released for DOS in 1996 and is currently abandonware. It was developed by Intelligent Games, notable for June 2098.
One frame.
When I first recall my experience with Azrael's Tear, it would have been the demo, which does a poor job of explaining exactly what's going on. You are very abruptly dumped into an archaic and crumbling room, skittish dinos darting about at your feet, wearing what looks like weird, upholstered gadgetry around your head. A medieval manuscript is on the floor nearby. We can walk around, which is done by the cursor keys only, no strafing. Pressing H gives you some help on controls and tells you about the UI. You can get some general info about the place by scanning. We can eventually save someone, supposedly, from falling into a pit.
Help! Help me! Help me out of here! Ah, tricks and traps thought up by the ancient guardians. Puzzles and locks and the like that a mewling infant such as you couldn't hope to pass. As for me, I am called Lurker. But what matters who I am? Help me. Can't you see I'm trapped here?
We talk to a ghost, Neve, who tells you a sad story about her lover Oishin and her jealous sister Sasha.
Oshin, is that you at last? Oh no. My name is Neve. Our tribe gave my sister Sasha and I to the gods when Sun closed his eye many years ago. It was the greatest honor. People came from 100 miles. We entered the caves hoping to meet the god Sun himself, but instead we wandered, avoiding the guardians for years. We couldn't go down to the deep realm of Sun for fear of them. I thought Oshin was Sun come at last when he walked into the Cave of Blossoms. Or perhaps you've seen him? He's tall and beautiful. He has long dark hair and beard and a cloak fastened with a shining brooch. Sasha? She was always willful. She hated me when we were infants. But later she was as willing a sacrifice as I. Until, that is, we went down into the deeper realm of the gods, and she became so enamored of that place she spent longer and longer away from me.
And we do a little puzzle. But still you have no idea what is going on. This is no better in the full version's intro. To actually get some background, we have to turn to the manual. Here, we learn that this timeline experienced some severe tectonic shifts, and a reduction in the sea level that uncovered previously hitherto unknown ruins throughout the world. Renewed nationalist interest in the discoveries and the booming relic business resulted in a new breed of archaeologist. Gone are core samples, carefully mapped dig sites and stratigraphy. Carbon dating? More like no dating, because those guys are losers. In their place, tomb robbers with a gun and an encyclopedia in their helmet. They come to be known as raptors, Latin for thief. They will stop at nothing to secure priceless relics and artifacts, including killing their rivals.
Ready?
Then why didn't you hail me? Without the likes of you to sneak up on me, the place would be a little less dangerous.
And in the media, they are romanticized as dangerously sexy. Or sexily dangerous.
Next Saturday night, more naked Japanese people in a great flick called Secret Chronicle Prostitution Market.
Along with the manual, we also get 2 letters. One from a rival raptor, talking about the find of a century and splitting it 50-50. Our raptor colleague, Colin, writes of doing research and tracking a mysterious shipment from Jerusalem, and its unusually high-profile accompaniment of 12 Templar knights before stumbling upon the grave of one of those Templar knights themselves, Sir Guy, who, according to the gravestone, had apparently died 600 years later in 1763. After following the clue and digging up the corpse, Colin found a letter detailing the location of the Holy Grail itself. We can read this other letter, a last testament of Sir Guy of Bramley, recounting his story of how, during the Crusades, his renown in fighting shoulder to shoulder with his brother knight Talon bestowed upon them the honour of guarding the Grail. And so, under the leadership of Tobias de Treese, they descend under the earth to take up vigil over the recovered Grail. There, the power of the Grail stone already in the tunnels resulted in a sort of immortality. Then in 1763, a traitorous knight, Malik, abandoned his vigil, secured the Order's entire store of Grail stone, and fled the sanctuary. Sir Guy pursued, describing Malik as a wolf among sheep. But without proximity to Grailstone, Sir Guy was dying as he wrote the letter, aging at a rapid rate. He asked the reader to enter into the Temple of Eternus and retrieve the Holy Grail, describing it as humanity's only hope for salvation. And here is where we dive into the story. Big spoiler warning. Half the game is in its story and character. The other half of the game is in its mood. If you enjoy uncovering mysteries for yourself, skip ahead. But this is going to be most of the video, and I plan to go in deep. Throughout the course of the game, you will read documents and speak to various characters, either your fellow raptors or the immortal denizens of Eternus, mostly some of those original knights, to uncover clues as to what has transpired. We also have the design documents, which helps to fill in any gaps, so I will avail myself on this one occasion and answer, where does this Grailstone come from? Does it just grow in the ground? Millions of years ago, the Grailstone broke apart in the atmosphere, one part landing in Istanbul and being worked into the Grail, the other larger part landed in the north of Scotland, scattering itself through an existing cave network. In 1060, the Templar Order uncovered clues as to the location of the unusual tunnels said to contain stone with the same miraculous qualities as the Grail. 3 of those knights would begin to explore the wonders of this cave. Deep in Eternum, we come across the book detailing their expedition, written by the knight named Geoffrey. As instructed by Tobias, Malik and I set forth with 10 slaves. The expedition was to last for a week. For the first 3 days, we traveled through the dark, tiny caves beset by the small beasts we call Eugenes. These caves stank with the accumulated filth of millennia. We were ever hopeful of finding more evidence of those dwellings mentioned by the ghost of the well. Dwellings of the gods, as she described. We were intrigued. On the 4th day, our expedition bore fruit. A small crevice gave into a large chamber. We stood with astonishment before a great rising staircase that was an echo of the wondrous ziggurat of Ur-Nammu, that which scholars consider the remnants of the Tower of Babel itself. At that moment, we realized that the gods of Neve were in truth men, the Babylonian fathers of the great empire of Byzantium. Okay, I'm going to stop it here. These knights called a civilization who lived in these tunnels in 3000 BCE Byzantines, when there was already contemporary civilization called the Byzantine Empire, right there that the Crusaders would soon sack. And they also call it Babylonian, 1,000 years before the Babylonians were really a thing. And they're also in Scotland. This ancient grail-abusing civilization is nowhere to be seen in the design notes, which makes me think the historical soup of terms was added at the last moment to give an additional sort of air of ancient mystery. The ziggurat in-game is more of a tower with a long ramp. We'll just grant that when they say Byzantine, they mean this ancient underground society, and it's not a stupid word to call them that. For the sake of the story, we'll pretend to be okay with this. I continue with the night's story. After rest and reflection while the ziggurat was cleared of nesting beasts, we continued on and deeper into the caves for another week. We mapped various sizable chambers that will serve well for the temple. My mind is filling with ideas of their form. On the 5th day, 2 of our retainers were taken by the creature of the waters on the bank of a sunless stream. On the 6th day, my mind darkened with the weight of our discovery. A small series of Byzantine rooms, within which horrific experiments using Grailstone had occurred. In it, with even worse horrors, 3 mindless children, part animal, part beast, were hung on hooks, their very bones suffused with chips of Grailstone. When we return, I intend to have them taken to the surface, where their souls may be returned to God. I confess I wish to end our explorations after our previous discoveries. The deeper we go, the more horrors we find. Malik has convinced Tobias that we should continue. I am put to shame by his courage. Our next expedition took us again into the narrow, filthy crawlways, though a passage has now been broken through into the ziggurat chamber, making the opening stages of the journey easier. After 2 days of this, we found ingress into another Byzantine area. It seemed safe, and so we allowed one of our eager retainers to scout while we made camp. He returned shortly, shaking with delirium, with a swelling the size of his head and his side. I went on to investigate, and to my shame fled when I saw the very image of the manticore before me. We returned as quickly as possible, but too late for the slave who expired in agony. Malik, determined as ever to penetrate the deepest secrets of the Byzantine precursors, returned to the chamber of the Manticora with 5 slaves. His determination to study and learn a way to subjugate these monsters was admirable. After 3 weeks, he returned with the 1 slave that survived the venture with news of his discovery, that the monsters were passable by virtue of their savage, competitive nature. A full expedition was again possible. Malik's excitement at finding just beyond this chamber a fitting sanctum for the Grail prompted Tobias to join us. And surely, in a deep, vaulted cavern, we found ourselves beneath the light of 1,000 gleaming Grailstone stars, while standing on a larger, more elaborate ziggurat than the other, topped with an altar. It seemed designed to be home to the Grail. We set out again, hoping to find the homes of our predecessors. Beyond the chamber of the Manticora, we found corridors and passages collapsed by time and weight of rock above. Finally, we found a way through to a vast cavern filled with Eugenes and stranger vegetation than ever we had seen. This means Eternus can be self-sufficient without the need for external fields. Days later, and far deeper, we gazed in wonder on the empty ruins of our entire Byzantine town. At the end of this vast cavern was an opening that looked out upon a great subterranean lake, the call of enormous unknown beasts carrying across on a stale wind. On our return, we were amazed. During the 2 weeks for us, 6 months had passed for the others, and nearly 4 years outside. Despite Malik's objections, Tobias has called a halt to further exploration. But this was a turning point for Malik. We find this note from June 1163. The expeditions into the deep caves have proved intriguing. I am fascinated by the Byzantines and their religion. To attempt to reshape living things to one's own will, is this not to mirror God himself? I will study them thoroughly to unlock this power. The possibilities are endless. An army of tireless soldiers obeying one strong man. Eternus could become the heart of an empire. But these are distant dreams. Tobias has not the vision to imagine them, and the others are as faithful hounds at the hearth, curled around the feet of an intellectual dotard. I must be patient, wait the right moment. In 1193, Tobias receives orders from the head of the Templars that Eternus is to be the foundation of a new religion based on the Templar tradition, administered by an immortal priesthood. 7 years later, it is built, taking 40 shiploads of materials and the lives of 600 slaves, endlessly toiling under the effects of the Grail Stone up until the moment they were drowned to ensure the place's secrecy. In 1203, we discover from a note that Tobias also discovers that his Templar overlords orchestrated the sack of Constantinople, which actually was a real historical event where the Christian Crusaders couldn't wait long enough to get to the Middle East to start sacking a city, and instead sacked a Christian one. You know, which is also known as Byzantium. However, we learn here it was because of rumours of Grailstone, which had long since been plundered from the meteor site. But Tobias would soon become aware the Grailstone doesn't just extend life, it warps and changes things around it. Every scan of an inhabitant of these tunnels reveals extensive mutations. But this isn't limited to physiology, it affects people's minds, on top of the pressures of being confined to a vigil underground for the rest of one's endless life with a handful of other people. After correspondence with the leaders of the Templars and preparations made to meet with them, nothing really seemed to have been done until the unexpected persecution of the Templar Order at the hands of the Pope and the King in 1307, which would drive the order underground and into hiding amongst the Scottish Freemasons. In any case, from these notes we can gather that the Templar organization is not the most virtuous band of fanatic zealots. But if that's not enough, we have another band of fanatical zealots, the Prairie de Sion, the Priory of Sion.
The Temple of Solomon is on the slopes of Mount Zion, and within it there are 27 paths to the truth, none of which may be revealed to outsiders or even visitors within a dream.
They once claimed to be our friends, a sister order, but they vanished when they could have helped the Templars in their darkest hour.
Described as a sister organization to the Knights Templar, in fact they had already snuck in 2 of their spies amongst the 12 Knights. The dissolution of the Templars forces the hand of the Priory of Sion, and they would have raiders infiltrate a supply ship to Eternus several months later.
Our masters wished the Grail for purposes it was not my place to ask. We were to rendezvous with our agents within the temple.
We find the notes to the 2 Templar spies advising that this is a ruse, that the raiders were meant to fail, should fail, must fail, and it was all to force the hand of Tobias to close the doors of Eternus and withdraw from the world. And withdraw they do. Tobias still maintains contact with the outside world, and in 1482 the last remnant of the Templars, hiding within the Scottish Freemasons, constructs a great castle above Eternus, further fortifying and obscuring access to the site. Tobias has secret rooms and chambers constructed throughout the castle, unknown even to the owner, and creates the persona of Baphomet, the mystical servant of God, to communicate with its occupants to various ends.
The purpose of this place will soon be fulfilled. This is the last time I will ever speak to you. A good performance, my friend?
As good as any, Mama, my lord.
At some point in time, and from context clues, this seems to be pretty early on, Tobias would have a vision of a holy thief who would come to retrieve the Grail to save mankind from some impending disaster implied to be a virus. The Priory even confirms these visions, creating their own immortal seer, and this is the context clue, which only really comes up at the end. And We don't quite know how, but we'll presume some unknown source of Grail stone or some other miraculous thing. In 1512, Malik finally translates some notes from the previous Byzantine culture regarding the philosophies of Mal, and some notes on experiments or rituals involving Grail stone, which he becomes eager to pursue. In 1658, Malik would openly fracture from Tobias and his vision, securing himself an area he termed the Court of Malik, and convincing other knights to turn against Tobias, such as Edgar the Axe.
I am Edgar, and before you ask, I am no lapdog of Tobias. Perhaps the only one sane enough not to be.
Philip.
I am Philip, the one of the 12 poor fools burdened with the honor of guarding the oh so Holy Grail. We revered it, but over the decades I have seen it destroy the love and fellowship we once had. The cursed thing is of no good this side of Tartarus. I doubt that Christ ever even saw this cup. So you see, I want you to rid us of it. Please.
And Talon.
You thief! You stop where you are! I warn you, I have no faith in Tobias's dreams.
In 1763, a century later, the depravity of the revival of the ancient Byzantine worship of Mal forces Tobias and his loyalists to force their way into the court and confront Malik. But it was too late. Malik had fled, taking with him every piece of Grailstone that had been secured at great cost from the deepest, deadliest monster-filled depths, and had left behind only a charnel house of horrors. Sir Claude had been made to ingest Grailstone, and the Knight had become a deadly, undying Knightmare. I wrote Nightmare with K in my script. Sorry. A pissed-off, unkillable Knightmare that had to be chained up and interred into a sarcophagus in the crypt, for lack of not knowing what else to do. As we know from the letter in the box, Sir Guy chased after Malik, unsuccessfully, before withering and dying in the outside world without the nurturing radiance of Grailstone, only to be discovered by Cullen, the rival raptor who wrote to you. The remaining knights stayed behind, Tobias still biding his time for the coming of the holy thief, worthy of the Grail, foretold to save the world. And this is where you enter the picture. From your first experience with Lurker, the Spanish slave of Tobias screaming for help, through to the puzzles and keys, you don't need to have seen or read Gawain and the Green Knight for it to be apparent that this is all to a purpose, that the Temple of Eternus is a testing ground to prove the worth of those here to attempt to claim the Grail. This is best exemplified towards the end, just before the final part of the test, where you see a room with various models, with interactable points like doors and sluices, with which an accidental click could flood important areas if you aren't careful, or unlock doors to access new ones. Adding to the difficulty of the test is dealing with a number of unpredictable elements, in both the environment, the competing raptors.
Without the likes of you to sneak up on me, the place would be a little less dangerous.
And the nature of trying to deal with the mentally erratic denizens of Eternus.
I knew that greedy maggot Edgar would tread us all in secret to save himself. Which way is the dock, good sir? Straight downward to hell!
Before moving on to the ending, I want to give you an idea of the sorts of things a raptor encounters while traversing Eternus. The halls of Eternus are filled with the decayed splendor of eons past. There are at least 2 occasions I can think of where the floor gives way. The mutants descended from creatures of bygone eras have overrun the barriers and been adopted as parts of this great trial. Although you are armed with a gun with a limited amount of bullets throughout the game, typically death is either slow enough to react to, or quick and instantaneous but entirely preventable. And so there is a certain tension of exploring a new area, or even just in navigating a conversation.
Ah, you mean this? I've been puzzling over its workings.
People will not always put up with your endless questions.
I am sick of your meaningless prattle. Begone, phantom. I will close my eyes and wish you away. You do not exist. And when you have gone, I feel sure I will wake to see the cursed rigging before my eyes once more.
So either reload the game to learn more like me, or carry on with small pieces of the puzzle, trying to remember all the names, wondering who might have been the Priory of Scion agents, or what's relevant, or who to trust when it comes to the crucial final decision. You might wonder, is there a point to asking everyone about the thing in the water? It's just a monster, right? You've seen it. You scared it off once near the docks.
We do not know. In the deepest caves on the very shores of hell, it seemed, I once heard the terrifying cries of beasts across a sunless lake. I suspect these creatures to be more fearsome than any human imagination could conceive. I also suspect this thing to be just one of them, lost in the upper caves. We have all thanked God that it is unable to leave the water.
Also, finding an actual friend can be very rare. But finding out more can sometimes have big payoffs. Or just add to the interesting story, or uncover clues to the state of relations between the knights after Malik fled. Talum is volatile but riddled by guilt about something.
You! What did you hear? Why are you spying on me? What do you mean, paranoid?
Vincent the Innocent was murdered, and no one will believe he's innocent.
I was murdered falsely for crimes I had no part in. Will you hear me out with a just ear and an open mind, stranger?
Philip tells you to ask Edgar the Axe about a box at the docks. So you go and help him.
There is a chest that was put in that area that contains personal effects very dear to my heart. I haven't seen these things in decades.
Since there is a time dilation effect due to the Grailstone within Eternus, decades refers to 1763 when Malik fled with their store of Grailstone. Although there's always something a little off about Philip.
Wait. Please, don't be alarmed. I just want to speak to you a moment. I could be of great service.
You retrieve the box from the docks. Turns out the box is empty.
Empty! Empty, you treacherous filth! Where is it? Where have you hidden it?
Was the box empty because Philip double-crossed you? Maybe not. Eventually, Edgar the Axe catches up with you, but the Grailstone prevents your death and you are captured.
You're lying! He was wounded. I saw the blood. I will cut you a piece at a time until you tell me where it is!
Jack Sinclair, an airman who has been trapped in Eternus since the 1940s, crawls out of hiding and saves you.
Don't say anything. Walls have ears. My name's Jack. I know what you lot are down here for. You've come for the Grail, haven't you? Well, I hate this whole thing. I hate the way these people are playing games with all of you. I can't stand seeing a good man hanging up there to rot. Are you a good man? Hang on.
You also eventually come across the raptor who was supposed to have originally sent the letter, Colin, and he claims to have done no such thing.
In the cathedral? How did you find out about Eternus? The document I found was unique. There's no way you could be so close behind me.
And it seems likely this was actually Tobias. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Tobias wrote both letters.
Letter? What letter? My God, how many of you are down here? I knew it. My God, I thought maybe I was being guided. Everything I looked for was right there waiting for me, and then when I heard about this test... What a fool. Listen, I've been manipulated, and so have you. I sent no letter.
Someone would have had to bury Sir Guy with it. The design documents detail how Tobias has secretly left Eternus many times in the past. Eventually, you'll have to decide. Do you side with Jeffrey, who is described as either too smart or too sane, and just seems like he wants to get out of there?
Jeffrey? I don't trust him. He was the architect of Eternus. He seems unaltered by the long years in the light of Grailstone. By this very token, I suspect him. No one can live down here without that evil substance corrupting or torturing them in some way.
I too am astonished by this revelation, but you must believe me. I overheard Tobias telling Lurker the semantics of a new vision that sees him as head of a Temple Eisen order that will last 1,000 years, and not only dominate this world, but go out amongst the stars and dominate others also.
Or Tobias, a dangerous fanatic who has visions which, let's face it, certainly sound like they could be true.
You are blessed, my child. Your life continues. And so it is clearly written in the stars that you will be shielded from harm a little longer. It is not my privilege to guide, but this much I will say. Through me, you are being tested by God Himself. If you are not worthy, you will fail. If your heart is not pure, and if your vision of that which you seek remains tainted by the greed that has surely led you here, you will fail. Think on this and be warned. The way forward lies in prayer. Deviate from that path, and you will encounter perils you might otherwise have avoided.
Follow Tobias's path, and if you enter the wrong room, Tobias waylays you with Edgar the Axe and a fellow raptor. He is reflected deeper on just who the holy thief from his vision is.
Welcome, false thief. Hold fast. No doubt you are surprised to see the friends once sundered by the manipulations of Malik reunited.
Yes, our differences have long been resolved for the sake of confusing the traitors in our midst.
Indeed, Edgar. Thank you, my friend. You see, thief, the vision was just a presage of the true vision that has come to me in these last hectic days. I am the holy thief. I will stride forth wearing your strange clothing. I will form a great army of light, even as Malik has gone forth and is forming one of dark. The final battle will be fought, and I, the victor, will lead the survivors of mankind to the new Jerusalem. Unfortunately, you, my friend, have played your part in this destiny.
If you make another mistake, Philip and Lurker set a trap for you and admonish you for underestimating them like everyone else.
Oh, so close. Poor child of the new world. Perhaps the seed of mankind has spread too thin. If you are the best it has to offer.
Can you still hear me, thief? Oh, I see you are fading fast. Underestimation is the key, you see. Poor little slave Lurker and hopeless, nervous Philip. That mad fool Tobias would never have guessed us to be the sharpest minds in Aternis. Since I've no longer been working alone, and I've had the fealty of my clever friend here, old plans to rescue the Grail from this hellhole were assured their fruition. But I can see you can no longer hear me. How sad.
Along this path, there's also a long-term payoff from way back in the beginning of the game regarding the ghost in the well and the amulet of her lover. As your airman friend Jack Sinclair comes to save you for a second time, the monster attacks. There's more than one thing you can do, but you can ward it off with the amulet. If you paid attention, you would know that that thing in the water was once a jealous woman, Sasha.
Wondrous places. The shaping of stone was like nothing I have seen. But Sasha was changed by it. She wanted Oshin, and the gods had punished her by making her ugly. Oshin would have nothing to do with her. Oh, but why hasn't he come back?
Navigate all those ambushes and you can finish the game by following Tobias's path. If you follow Jeffrey, you get to go through Malik's former study, which was apparently sealed off, meet a wind-up monster, and read some more of his notes. Along this path, Tobias intercepts you at the very end, does a wrestling move, and takes the Grail stone Jeffrey was absconding with. Probably stolen from the docks. This far from Grailstone, Jeffrey withers and turns to dust. Then Tobias allows you to escape for whatever reason.
Oh God, I feel the centuries pouring into my soul.
Mission complete. But what's this? Grail. Grail never changes. But apparently Grail changes you. Tobias's brother turns out to be the immortal seer at the head of the Priory of Sion. It's a bittersweet ending, essentially an accomplishment of the Templars' theocratic world order by their sister org, but it fits so well with the theme that the Grail corrupts everything, and everything was already corrupt to begin with. You do, after all, begin and end the game as an unscrupulous thief. There's no reason for it to end idyllically. There are also a few tropes I really adore about this. I like a darker story, and I have a bit of a soft spot for stories of secret societies and alternative histories stretching back millennia. Give me a mood of antiquity, give me a ruin to explore, and I'm in. Then the story and the incredible characters. Massively flawed, frequently damaged immortals, experimenting with life and biology who can't survive without their nearby stone. It reminds me of the Samichi from the World of Darkness setting. I love that stuff. I go crazy for it. There's also similarity to the Priest tale in Dan Simmons' Hyperion. with its cruciform parasite that resurrects and mutates in a similar fashion to the Grailstone. I would strongly recommend that story, it's really good. I also came across a forum thread about one person who claimed to be doing an Azrael's Tear thief mod, and there are some small similarities with that game too, with the knights and the cogs and the gears and the dinosaur-like creatures and the underground ruins. I would even describe the Grailstone and the effect it has on people as an almost Lovecraftian element, on top of the idea that the main character is, in essence, an unscrupulous form of archaeologist, which is your classic Lovecraft trope of an academic protagonist. Malik also appears to be going mad through his notes as he practices what he considers the philosophy of Mal and resurrects its forgotten experiments. In fact, everyone in prolonged contact has grown mad. The monster in the water was a person once.
Not that Christ ever even saw this cup.
The voice of Baphomet. The gateway into Eternus has been opened as foretold.
In the end, the Grail isn't just some MacGuffin, it's a focus as a tool for various well-written, decently acted characters with their own agendas. This game is an incredible journey and a sort of unsung classic. It's a masterpiece in how its elements come together to support a really ambitious game, near unmatched in its mood and sense of place. As this is an adventure game with puzzles, I should probably give a brief note on the difficulty. The first half of the game was a satisfying level of challenge. If you paid attention, you could figure out what to do or be told it by the characters. In the second half of the game, puzzles do become more difficult, and I did have to resort to a guide for direction, even if for something as arguably frustrating as not realizing a winch-based elevator could go up another floor. I don't think this is something that should put anyone off. It's never Sierra Moon logic, it never gets to that point, but you are expected to pay attention to dialogue. This game was released in the same year as Quake, so it can't be faulted for low poly models. But Quake never had an orrery, and the tortured characters could be racked by Grailstone mutation for all we know. The antiquated graphics, to be honest, frequently adds to the surreal nature in a way I now see indie games like Lunacid and Dread Delusion capitalizing on for PS1 graphics. Similarly, the environmental textures have so much sense of character and presence. Other than an orrery, which I love, storehouses, gorgeous decaying bookshelves, scrolls, you can literally smell the vellum. Smell the vellum. I like how that sounds. Don't steal that from me. Whatever you call what this feels like, I want more of it. Scroll punk? No, wait, that's stupid. There's a crunchiness to the textures that sometimes makes the art look more natural than it ought to look. Look at that rock texture, and those shadows verge on the intentional artistic sense of chiaroscuro, the artistic contrast of light and dark. Such an incredibly striking use of pre-baked environmental shadows that you wouldn't normally see in such an early 3D game. I've seen far uglier examples of light and dark in much more modern games. They did well with a custom 3D engine in DOS, well before DirectX had become established. Unfortunately, DOSBox performance is not great. Still, the character of the environment carries it through. There is maybe a digital version of a genius Loki of Eternus, a spirit of the place, as the Romans would call it, that will haunt your subconscious. The mood of the game looms and has loomed large in my mind for decades.
Thief, stop!
There's just something about it. But some sort of port to modern systems would certainly go a long way to reviving this spirit. The old Grailstone transfusion, as Malik would say. More on that later. Azrael's Tear contains some excellent voice acting for a cast of 4 that don't appear to have had any other credits. As if there wasn't already enough incredible ambience in your visuals, there's more ambience for your ears. Then, the MIDI soundtrack is particularly outstanding with a nice sound font. The music was written by Kerry Minnear of British prog rock band gentle giants. Let's indulge. I like the earwormy hooks of this one. Other songs can be eerie and haunting. This is my favourite, so I might just let it ride for a little longer than I probably should. Something I've come to realise about myself is, I really enjoy hearing pipe organs. Maybe I'm not the only one. The developers are rightfully proud of what they've accomplished here. We have a lot of information about this game and its development thanks to numerous interviews. Project leader Matthew Sibb released the design proposal and the development notes. The notes fill in some details about missing characters and hint at an idea of a more survival direction that was removed, like the need to drink water and consume food, and cooldown periods of being injured and incapacitated until the Grail could heal or your tech could repair itself. The design proposal to publishers is similarly interesting, with the original idea being for the game then dubbed Raptor being something similar to Mist, as opposed to the haunting textured polygons we eventually got. There's some utterly wild ideas in the proposal too. Like this, Raptor's many non-player characters will all behave according to their own artificially intelligent algorithms, giving each one its own behavior patterns. The characters will not follow linear preset paths. The independence of the non-player characters will allow Raptor to avoid the traditional adventure game's pre-scripted branching storyline, instead using genetic algorithms and finite state machines to allow an evolving storyline, which will not be the same from one game to the next. Now, it might be in the nature of proposals to sell wild ideas to the publisher. Maybe, but a year later, The Last Express, a real-time point-and-click adventure game, would release to critical acclaim, before also not selling enough and sinking into obscurity. There's also instructions for a board game, and if the game really took off, there could have been a TV series or VR in the mid to late 90s. I found these pictures of VR at the time looking like the Navigator's chair from the Alien series. Ken Haywood, credited with the original concept, has not lost his belief in his idea, and has been passionate in trying to arrange for the rights holders to be located and for the game to be sold again, to recognise the efforts of the development team, and to push for a remake. In 2017, an article on Skirmish Frog stated that the disparate parties who owned the rights were in communication with Night Dive Studios, and that the dream was at least on the road to becoming increasingly likely. As of now, July 2023, nothing has eventuated. Skirmish Frogs is also a dead website. Lamau. I still remain hopeful. It's such a fascinating game and one of the best adventure games I've ever had the pleasure of playing. Even now, long since after I practically turned my back on the genre itself, just as the industry did, or I guess it was more of a shrugging off, I can't help to stop and rave about this game and its enthralling setting. After playing it, I feel like the Grail has its hooks in me, and I'm withering outside of the nurturing environment of Eternus. I want nothing more but to return one day with maybe better graphical fidelity. I personally hope that Ken Haywood gets his wish and the game goes on sale and has a remake. Hey, if you made it this far, I really appreciate it. This is the longest of all my videos, but a large part of the reason is there's a lot of information about Azrael's tier, but when I looked, none of it had been presented on YouTube. There were some gameplay uploads, but not much else. So if you liked the video, and like hearing about overlooked curiosities in the world of gaming, I hope you hit like and subscribe. Or if you just want to fall asleep to my voice, I'm down with that. Smell the